Hey everybody, I've been invited to start talking.
We're listening.
My name's AJ. I'm going to read from my novel in progress. So we're going to do some prose. I tried to wear a pretty shirt because you're just going to be staring at me for 25 minutes. But you can also stare anywhere or look at anything. My novel's called Numbskull. It's about a queer musician who has a chronic illness. I've been telling people lately it's a medical thriller that just wishes it was a love story. There's a procedure that happens in the novel that's not in this chapter, but because I have this opportunity to just commune with y'all, I just wanted to share. It addresses the science of trepanning or trepanation, which is the oldest surgery in the world, the process of drilling a hole in your skull, or self-trepanation, the process of drilling a hole into your own skull. We're not there yet. I'm reading from chapter 2. So just a couple things I wanted to say. Josiah is a queer musician. He plays the trumpet. He has a chronic illness. This is not a story about grief, but I happened to be reading a chapter that when they were post-it notes on my wall, I dubbed it the place where we talk about grief. And there might be some details that pop up that seem illogical because I'm not starting from chapter 1, but I trust y'all that you'll trust me that I knew what I was doing. And I have some water here. Don't forget to drink some water, AJ. Okay, great. Thanks for being here. Thanks for having me. Truly, this is an excerpt from Numbskull. Oh, thanks. On the 7th floor of Mount Sinai's neurointensive care unit, Josiah is strapped to an exam bed. Stickers and wires connect his head and his chest to a computer, while large Velcro straps hold his legs, his hips, and his chest snug against the bed. How are you feeling? His doctor asks. I feel like Frankenstein. Yeah, his doctor wiggles into latex gloves. You look as ridiculous as you feel. Dr. Roy has to go to a lot of meetings where he's forced to share stupid icebreakers, and his fun fact about himself is always his aphantasia, meaning he can't see literal images in his mind. A black man originally from Cleveland, Roy made his way up the neurological community by way of Ivy Leagues. His father was a doctor too, delivering over 2,000 babies to the greater Cleveland area. And Josiah took a liking to him when Roy pulled out a large sketchbook after a session several months ago to show him some of his drawings. And although he can't see images, it doesn't mean he's without imagination. Far from it. Dr. Roy draws monsters with crayons and charcoal that are vivid and grotesque. Some pages remind Josiah of Basquiat and others of a child trying to exorcise a demon through the tip of a lime green Crayola. Do you want Terry in here for this? He asks. I'm good. All right, well, here's what's going to happen. Roy's tone shifts. He stops near the tray one of the nurses has prepared, 8 needles, perfectly aligned. I'm going to begin the tilt table test. You're going to receive a small dose of adrenaline, and then when the table tilts upright, all the sensors on your head and chest will hopefully relay some information to us. Ideally, we're going to find out the source of what triggers your episodes, and we're going to learn if they are seizures or syncope or if there's something else. Josiah is curious to know what adrenaline feels like. He didn't realize it was something you could bottle until just now. Dr. Roy goes over to the tray, the first needle. He pierces the glass vial, checking for air bubbles, a few flicks. Are you ready? Josiah nods, but his head can't move. This first dose, it's going to feel like you just went up a flight of stairs. The needle goes into Josiah's IV and his elbow freezes over instantly. He can literally feel the adrenaline traveling through his veins in a way that makes him understand his vein and all their pathways to his heart. Within seconds, his breathing changes to something more shallow, his chest involuntarily expanding and contrasting. Roy waits for 60 seconds and then he tilts the table by pressing a button with his foot, suspending Josiah in midair between the table and the leather straps. He hangs there, panting. For a moment he thinks of being a witch in the old days and how they were probably strapped to tables just like this. You're doing great! And then he's lowered back down, and it's time for round 2, because the only rule to this game is Josiah has to keep playing until he passes out. This next dose will feel like you just went for a jog. Roy appears to be making his examples up on the fly. Do you run? Not really. The drug this time feels less cold, but works just as fast. His breathing is now shifted into heaving. His mouth dries out, making it harder to swallow. The next dose feels like Josiah ran a mile. Then 2 miles, then like he's running for his life, kind of dryness. His lungs are trying to swallow each other. Then the panic kicks in. His body is being terrorized. His brain doesn't know this is a test and enters fight-flight mode, neither of which Josiah can do at the moment. He can't fight and he certainly can't run. Now on round 7, his entire body is tingling like he's rolling around in a coffin of ballpoint pens. And then something else. Not exactly numbness, a softness. He doesn't feel the straps anymore. He feels his chakras, something he doesn't believe in, but he feels 6 or 7 hot plates buried inside of him. His heart, his gut, his feet, his cock, the hill on the back of his tongue that is now so dry there is no more desire to swallow, and his head. His head feels like one of those spotlights that shine up into the sky, the ones you can see 10 miles away on a highway. In other words, he's moments away from passing out. And then a large stretch of empty black. Like he's in a moving car with the windows down, but he can't see the road and he can't see the sky. Miles and miles of it. Matched only by the sense of freedom that comes from driving so fast it feels slow. The cold wind pulling and tugging at his face. In the distance, Josiah swears he can almost hear people cheering and clapping. That boy's on my Facebook again. Aunt Terry turns her phone to Josiah, who's propped up in a hospital bed, so he can see the advertisement for a new Amazon Prime show where Benji is one of 5 beautiful men on the ad, dressed to look like they're poor and have pimples, but somehow also managed to look like an ad for a new cologne. Ugh, Terry cracks her neck before she really lays into him. He looks like he got some work done, and it's not good. She does this. It's a bit. She works really hard to restructure the narrative so her nephew always comes out on top between the two of them, between him and his ex. Even when Josiah's in a hospital bed with a bloodstained shirt and an empty cup of apple juice, and Benji is who knows where in the world right now, having the worst time with all that money and all that attention. How miserable. But Terry makes sure Josiah knows she's on his side and will always be repulsed at how good bad guys like Benji look on camera. The blood on Josiah's shirt has now turned the color of mud. He bit his tongue when he passed out during the test. There's a small slit now, and when he runs it against the edge of his teeth, it stings in a way that makes him want to do it again. He rattles the ice in his empty cup of apple juice like it were the tail of a rattlesnake, hoping to conjure more, passing larger cubes from cheek to cheek while scrolling on Grindr. This is the rhythm Terry and Josiah have grown used to, waiting in small, sterile rooms together. Did they give me something? Let me check. Terry swipes over to her notes. Why? Because I'm almost smiling? Really? I haven't felt this good in a minute. Like I'm kind of floating. My back feels amazing. They gave you a tramadol. Is it weird if I ask for more? Terry reads from her phone, whatever the first blurb on Google says. It's an opioid and highly addictive. No. Why can't we have nice things? That explains your back. It says it works down your spinal cord and nervous system first. Well, if they could bring me some apple juice, life would be so lit right now. He swipes past the Mount Sinai regulars on the grid, a tap from Spencer, the nurse he met in the parking lot a few weeks ago for a blowjob. Although when Josiah said he was coming, Spencer pulled his mouth off like he didn't know what was ailing Josiah exactly, and maybe it was in his fluids, which left Josiah trying to block the incoming mess with his hands, his arms outstretched like he was warming himself over a fire. And of course, Spencer was totally allowed to change his mind, of course, but it was the way it made Josiah feel dirty. It was the way it reminded him why he prefers Ludwig's dressing room, because honestly, he's the cleanest thing in there. You can have some more of my sweet tea? Terry asks. I'm fine. His mouth numb and wet and smiling just a little bit at the edge. It's the tramadol for sure, but it's also a little bit to do with feeling like today he's finally going to get some answers. On average, it takes a patient approximately 2 years and 5 doctor visits to even get diagnosed with Lyme disease. Josiah was an outlier. He lost count after 50. That's why he and Terry take notes, although Terry's are scientific and Josiah's are more like abandoned poems in the margins. Safe to say Terry is heavily involved, even though it's a 6-hour bus from Exton to Mount Sinai. But Josiah is so lucky for it. He wouldn't be anywhere near a semblance of recovery if it weren't for her and her painstaking attention and research and follow-up questions and listening to hours of please hold music. She records all the conversations and transcribes them on a Google Doc, a trick she learned from her time as a nurse practitioner. Josiah jokes that when this is all said and done, their notes will make a nice coffee table book. You lost weight again, Terry observes over her most recent notes. Are you eating? This is not to say she isn't a little overbearing at times, because that's what happens when you have a bag of tricks and nowhere to use them. When Josiah's mom died, they made the news. She died on a Tuesday and was headlining the very next Monday with David Muir. What can you say? Josiah had 18 kick-ass years with his mom, and then a year that was one relentless bummer after another. It started in her feet. She started tripping everywhere. Josiah became embarrassed to go out with her. He'll never admit it, and now he's mortified at himself and clearly has a lot more to bury besides his mom. MDE was the diagnosis, a motor neuron disease, which is essentially where all the neurons that tell your body what to do. Do this, do that, walk, blink. These little guys who carry out orders were catching fire on the hottest day after the longest drought. There was no putting this fire out. There was just, enjoy the parts of you that aren't on fire yet while you still can. And so she did that. She did that part real good. And then she left, on her own terms. Honest to God, one of the last things she did was laugh. Maybe she made the mistake of choosing to keep her son in the dark about it, but she doesn't have to worry about regret. Josiah does. What he's left with is the last time he saw her. She was in a great mood, but her breath was shit. This is what remains. A really good hug while holding his breath. Terry stole the medications from the hospital, the ones her sister crushed into a green naked juice. 2 weeks later, the general manager calls Terry into a conference room, and then the police escort her out. There was a trial. Josiah was an undergrad at the time, and colleagues wanted to debate ethical suicides while Josiah throws back his runny eggs in the mess hall. His mom recorded a video saying she acted alone and the charges were dropped, but Terry still lost her career. Even if she moved states, she'd find it very hard to escape this, and she knew it. She made peace with it, is what she told her therapist, at least, before dumping her. Still, she punches a wall sometimes. She drinks herself to sleep, but she's found ways to maintain the peace. And Josiah didn't fare too well either. He buried himself in school, i.e. partying. He looked forward to his hangovers, the violent ones. They forced him to focus on a different kind of ache. He dropped 20 pounds from the Adderall problem and also found boys to be a free and useful distraction, all those frat boys looking to cash in on a secret. Terry worried, obviously, and Josiah grew allergic to her. One day, Terry shows up to campus with the dog. He's healthy, he's up to date on all his shots. She gives him paperwork that says this is an emotional support dog that's even allowed on airplanes. Wait, what the fuck? Josiah is still rolling on whatever powder he left crushed on his dresser that morning. Not at all convinced this dog is a good idea. I don't need a dog. I don't want a dog. Kid, listen. Aunt Terry, take this dumb fucking dog with you or I'll take it to the shelter. Josiah Brady Russell. Terry's voice, now no longer the voice of his dead mom's sister, but the voice of the closest thing he has to a parent. Here's where we're at. I can only worry about you so much, buddy. I need you to worry about you, and if you can't do that, fine, then I need you to promise something you will outlive it. I need to know you're gonna stick around. He takes in the rescue and names him Zeus. He's a motherfucking tyrant at first. Zeus chews through all of his roommates' makeup brushes and leaves hundreds of little tally marks on Josiah's legs. He takes him back to the shelter twice, but chickens out at the sign that says animal abandonment this way. Zeus eats used tampons and throws them up whole. They take walks together and Zeus pulls left when Josiah wants to go right. Emotional support dog, my ass, he tells everyone. More like I'm his emotional support human. Until one day when the thought of leaving Zeus to fend for himself in this world, now knowing the love that this animal has for him, spawned into too much to bear. Josiah found himself tethered to an animal that enjoyed eating his own shit. Aunt Terry was right, Josiah thought one night as he plays his trumpet for Zeus until he falls asleep, his nose nuzzled between his two stupid front paws. After that, Josiah and Terry never really saw each other except for the obligatory check-ins. Good, you? Yeah, fine. Are you eating? He felt their relationship like an inch wide and a mile deep. Neither of them liked to talk about shit. They had other ways to cope. That's what they were doing together. They were coping in their own lonely ways. It wasn't until COVID happened that Terry realized she was desperate to nurse again. Her whole life prepared her for this gigantic trauma the world was going through, but she wasn't allowed to help. She wasn't allowed anywhere near it. And so, in the most economical way of putting it, Terry lost her fucking shit. That's when Josiah left the city to stay with her in Philly, outside Philly. I'm scared I'll get a flare-up if I stay, he told her. He didn't want Terry to feel pitied or whatever. He knows what that's like. So she turned her garage into a bedroom and he slept on an air mattress. And it was there, in those few months when the world stopped, that Terry and Josiah found out that they're actually obsessed with each other. Terry started delivering food to low-income students who were no longer getting free lunches at schools, and Josiah would help make the sandwiches, spreading peanut butter thick as they listened to NPR. They liked cooking together, turns out. They start reading the same book, a 2-person book club. They renovate her house and start a garden that's yielded maybe 3 edible items in the last 2 years. And eventually, and only every so often, they would talk about her. Softly, like a giant was sleeping in the next room. And then they would just sit. Well, do you want the good news or do you want the good news? Dr. Roy asks, the energy of the room shifting, now pulsing with anticipation, making the fluorescence seem warm. You pick. Josiah looks to Terry. She winks. Let's have some good news. Dr. Roy sits on the stool with wheels, his legs pushing him around in a figure 8. It's not epilepsy. Not in the traditional sense. Wow, okay, Josiah says, still waiting for the good news. Dr. Blackwell, do you want to say some? He gestures to the woman at the door. Josiah vaguely remembers her when he was strapped to a table, the woman behind the video camera. Of course, hi, she steps in. So, it appears you have all the symptoms, but your neurons aren't. When people have epilepsy, we have to worry about damage. Brain cells die when people have seizures. Your episodes look like seizures, and I've seen a lot of them, but they don't read like one. And I think that's because the Lyme is mimicking some of the symptoms. Sometimes Josiah has to remind himself that Lyme is not a person with a personal vendetta. Lyme does a lot of bullshit like that. It exploits the body for little cracks and turns them into gaping fissures. Somewhere in his captain's log, he has a list of every diagnosis they've rolled out so far: flu, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, multiple sclerosis, autoimmune disorders, 4 of them, encephalitis, viral meningitis, syncope, and then there was that one doctor who said, I think you're stressed. Dr. Roy jumps in. Our guess is you have some scarring on your temporal lobe that occurred when you were a baby. Right, yes, Terry concurs, moving the mic on her iPhone back and forth between voices. And so here's our guess, Blackwell continues. The scarring on the brain typically can remain your whole life and never be an issue. But perhaps when you contracted Lyme, it sort of activated the damaged area, and now it's a problem. Activated it, though, like Josiah doesn't follow. We call Lyme disease the great imitator because it's impossible to correlate symptoms back to it. Blackwell's voice goes up as if she were asking, but we think there's no way if all your neurological issues aren't connected? That we both agree on, Roy says. Okay, Josiah looks to Terry for reassurance. Is this the good news? We think the Lyme is making it look like you have epilepsy. That's why the meds aren't working. Terry jumps in. So, he should stop the Tegretol. Yes, correct, Roy says. Obviously, the anti-seizure meds aren't helping, but we do want you to let us know immediately if you notice an uptick in episodes. Upticks. The thought of things getting worse makes Josiah want to scream until his throat bleeds, because somewhere else in his captain's log, he has a list of every medication he's tried. Oseltamivir, methotrexate, pregabalin, duloxetine, sertraline for depression, benzodiazepam for anxiety, azathioprine for autoimmune, acyclovir for viral infections, interferon beta and dimethylfumarate, hydroxychloroquine, celecoxib, gabapentin, prednisone, and that one doctor who simply prescribed ibuprofen and rest. Terry pushes her hands forward into a clasped fist, her tawny elbows now resting on her thighs. I think we're all ready to get past the diagnosis phase and move towards solutions. Well, the reason I wanted Dr. Blackwell to join me today is because, yeah, Josiah, you're right. We've been playing checkers with a disease that's playing chess. So I wanted her in here to talk about a treatment for you, and it's a lot of explaining, so just try to absorb it all before you react. Josiah steels himself. Blackwell adjusts her glasses. What we're recommending is a temporal lobe lobectomy, which would allow us to essentially... Wait, what the fuck? Josiah's already at a 10. Will you stick that thing through my eyes? Terry shakes her head. No, sweetie, that's lobotomy. Oh, sorry. It's okay, Blackwell continues. So a temporal lobe lobectomy is where we cut you open from the back of your skull to just above your ear, here to here. She uses her pen to demonstrate on her own. We would remove part of the skull and take out all the scar tissue that's being affected from the Lyme. Jesus, Josiah says, just barely. It sounds so intense, I know, but I promise you it's not. We have an incredibly skilled team. We've done this surgery on a lot of patients and have had a 98% success rate in stopping their seizure disorders altogether. Okay. Josiah finally starts to feel energized. His voice sounds even a bit hopeful. Yeah, that sounds... Hold on. Terry puts her hand out. What? She gestures to Blackwell. Can you talk about the side effects, please? But instead, Roy scoots in on his chair. Right, so the more brain tissue we have to remove, the more consequence. He nods to Terry almost as if to say, we're on the same team, remember? Like how? Josiah's eyes now darting all over the place. Roy continues, well, it happens to be the part of the brain that keeps track of time, temporal, right? And so yes, in some cases, patients have short-term memory loss, and in others, in more severe cases, much more rare and much more extreme cases, mind you, patients have lost their concept of time or their ability to understand it. Nope. Josiah stands up from the exam bed. Terry tries to help. Sweetie, right now it's a lot to... No, I'm done here. Roy tries again. But when you think about your quality of living, you have to ask yourself, blood rushes to his ears, muffling some of what they're saying, most of what they're saying. He'll look at Terry's transcripts later on and it'll sound like a different conversation, but right now all he can hear is cut and brain and out. No, he says, I'm a musician, sorry, but no, think of something else. Please, if I can't count a measure, I can't play music. We understand the stakes here, we really do, but at some point, you will be out of options. Roy stands over by the door, making sure this conversation finishes on his own terms. Josiah, at this point, we feel this surgery is inevitable. It's not an if anymore. It's a when. The room stops. Let's try another diet, or let's try another med, anything. I'm sorry to be so blunt with you, Roy says, but these are the cards you've been dealt. Now it's time you deal. Am I good to go? Roy stares at him for a bit, then he opens the door. Yeah, of course. We're all good here. It's a no for me, Doc. Anything but that, literally anything. If I can't play, what's the point? Okay, well, until then, let's keep our sessions as scheduled and pray we learn something new. Thank you, Dr. Roy. Terry turns off her voice recorder, collecting her things. She shakes Dr. Blackwell's hand. Nice to meet you. Do you? Josiah turns back to Roy. Sorry? Do you pray? Roy's head tilts forward. Oh, I guess, no, not in that sense. No. Your knee keeps hitting me, and it's becoming a problem. Doug, first trumpet, matter-of-factly stares at Josiah, his dirty bifocals in the holding room. Josiah tries. I don't know what else to do. Naturally, the pit wasn't built for this many people. Phantom of the Opera crams 27 musicians in there, and knees are always getting bumped. But some of the veterans who played in the pit for years have a special way of making it feel even more cramped. You don't know what else to do? Doug doubles down. Keep your legs together. Tie them with a string. Anything. It throws me off when you touch me. I can't take it anymore. Holy shit. Josiah's eyes bug out, not quite sure why Doug is near tears. Josiah literally just got here. Sorry, he offers. I'll do better. Josiah moves to the other side of the room, keeping his knees far away from Doug for now. The holding room is an impressively packed array of people passing time. Phantom is currently the longest-running Broadway show. Some of the people down here have played several thousand performances. Doug hit 2,000 sometime last week. There was a cake, but Doug can't eat processed foods before a show, and honestly, the thought of the milestone paralyzed him with so much existential dread. He hasn't had much of an appetite since. This job was only meant to be temporary. Sarah, the dresser for Christine, is dating Yusef, one of the French horns, even though she was dating one of the dancers a few months ago. Sarah comes down here every night to eat dinner with Yusef. Pisses everyone the fuck off. She's the only person not in the orchestra who hangs out down here, mainly because it's just as cramped as the pit itself, but also Josiah's caught wind that she's on the outs with Team Wardrobe. Josiah heard all this from Yusef, who reminds him every single time that he's dating the dresser sitting on his lap. But bullshit aside, this is a good place for Josiah to be. He feels safe down here. The one rule he's discovered with his body is that he's never had an episode when he's playing his trumpet. If he feels one coming on, just ever so slightly, blowing the soft E pulls him out of it. It's the last remaining thread of trust he has with himself. I don't even know when I'm playing sometimes, Claire says, sixth violin. What about you? Yusef turns to Josiah, plopping a half-boiled egg in his mouth before finishing the question. Have you entered the velvet rut? The what? It's what we call the numbness, Yusef says. You're here, but you're not here. It's a good job, don't get me wrong. Claire pats her legs in firm agreement. But after a while, we turn into cogs. Ghosts in the pit, Yusef says. It's normal to feel numb, she says. Josiah considers. Yeah, I guess. Maybe a little. Here's what I do. Yusef, still with some yolk on his lip. I try to notice one new thing every night, like it's a game. And I have to tell Sarah afterwards, did you know we're dating? Yeah, I did. One new thing every night, he continues. It helps me stay in my body, reminds me to be here. And then Yusef excuses himself to evacuate his bowels before the show, an unfortunate ritual they've all grown accustomed to down here in the rut supposedly lined with velvet. Josiah sits still, trying to pay attention, trying to find his one new thing for the night. But honestly, he thinks, now on his subway train home for the night, it's the same shit. That's when he gives up his seat to a woman with 2 suitcases and hears, Josiah? He turns around and sees him. Not a poster this time, not an ad on the Soho building, it's really him. Benji, oh my god. Josiah wades through a couple people to get closer. People watch as their arms offer themselves open to each other, and here they are again. The puzzle pieces is how they fit, still the same, if not more firm. I thought you were in London, Josiah asked, the train rocking them a bit closer. I got back a couple weeks ago, yeah, and Benji has mastered the pivot. Are you still doing Phantom? Oh, yeah, incredible. It's so funny to me, I can't get over it. What? Josiah asks. Well, just that we met at the opera, remember? And you hated it, and now you're there every night. Yeah, but is it really opera? Benji smiles. It's a different smile, Josiah realizes, almost caught in some uncanny valley. Veneers. Benji had a fake front tooth ever since his mom hit him with a softball when he was a kid. Back when Benji was too busy looking at a rogue butterfly and the softball knocked him out. He hated his smile, the way the fake tooth was perfectly white while the real teeth to the left and right were slowly yellowing through the years of coffee and smokes, to the point he developed a gorgeous smile without ever showing any teeth at all. But not anymore. Josiah smiles too, obviously, just with less abandon. "How's Zeus?" he asks. "Oh, yeah." Josiah's face drops in almost a comical way. "He died. He was old." "No way." Benji leans in, almost spitting. "Yeah, he was 13, yeah, blind and diabetic, and yeah. Josiah nods. Not too much more to say as the years are catching up, realizing that Benji has now missed the two most important deaths in Josiah's life. But Benji spent years with Zeus, and now he stands there holding on to the railing, not even sure if he's allowed to feel anything. "This is cute." Benji reaches out and pets his mohair jacket, picking a little piece of fuzz off and throwing it to the side, almost blushing at how easy it is to slip into old habits. The smallness of it all, the piece of fuzz, that microscopic feeling of every syllable cracking open at something much bigger, something with a secret tide pulling at the backs of their legs. In a panic, Josiah pretends that he's meeting someone and gets off 11 stops too early. Not quite an invitation for this to happen again, but also not. "Good luck," Josiah calls out, but there was no reason to wish him luck. "What the fuck, man? We talked about this. That was so weird, you fuck." He'll lay in bed tonight, writhing against the sheets over what he just said and what he didn't. He's gonna sleep like shit, dancing between this and that other thing, cut and brain and out, and that other thing, Amber moving. Fuck, he hadn't even talked to her today. Tomorrow, sleep. Dr. Roy's voice pulling him out every time he gets close. Next steps, he'll say it over and over again. Next steps, until it wears itself out and becomes its own language with its own special sounds. Next steps, next steps, next steps. His future feels so unsafe and uncertain right now. Wouldn't it just be easier to look the other way? We hate him, Josiah reminds himself. He fucked you up, so let it go. Why was he like this? No, come on now. He was past this. He did the work. He fucking processed or whatever. He named it grief and he squashed it. But he can't help it. His mind is steeping in Benji because grief isn't in steps. There's an infinite number and it's circuitous like a hamster wheel. And sometimes all it takes is the silliest little thing like a little piece of fuzz to crack you wide open all over again. Thanks.